You have rules at school, right? So I go into no touching, why we don't touch the items, listening. I'm speaking, you're listening, and then the third rule, we're here to have fun. We are the largest museum in New Jersey. We are the 12th largest museum in the country. So we made the dirty dozen. That's also important to get the group to stay together. We don't want anybody getting lost. We'd like to stay together. If there's things you'd like to see or stop and take some pictures, as long as it's allowable, I'm happy to let you do that. So let's take a walk over to our ancient Mediterranean gallery. This gallery you can enter on either side, right? But I prefer to enter here on the left. The 12th, based on size, one of the largest, I don't know what the largest in the country is. Okay.
Probably collection.
We are the 12th largest. Right, I know. And a lot of times if larger, more prominent museums have pieces that we also have, we're not always listed as a resource for that piece, but hopefully with more exposure and more communication and more curiosity, things will get updated. We recently had an updating of Wikipedia session here, right? So hopefully somebody updated some information about us. So initially, you're coming into this space. These are ancient Mediterranean artifacts. And you might ask, what are these ancient Mediterranean countries, cultures, right? And primarily we are broken down to Greece, Rome, and Egypt. You can introduce this space in many different ways. You can go about it in terms of materials, which I know Daryl's trained me on mostly everything. You're gonna see I'm like a mini bizarro version of Daryl because he trained me on everything. So you can break it down and talk about different materials, stone, glass, wood, metal, right? You can use it that way. You can also break it down based on location. Greece, Rome, Egypt. Come into the space. I also like to give the students about a minute to look around. And we've provided you with some information. Some of these pieces we can't attribute to a specific artist. It's even difficult to attribute a specific time to these pieces. So without getting bogged down too much on exact details, also your goal hopefully is to inspire the visitor to learn more and to come back and to maybe go home or Google something on their phone or purchase a book in our lovely shop. Where what you're really doing, I hope, is you're engaging them. They're able to have some voice here and they're able to interact with the art via you as a conduit, because they can buy the book and they can go home and look at it, or they can just stay home and look on the internet, but that's not quite the same thing as interacting with you. So I feel like I'm performing for you, right? And many times when I'm finished, we both are kind of like, and you almost don't even want to talk because you've talked so much. But I constantly remind myself that I need to hear from you to better direct what I want to say. Otherwise, I'm just a lecturer, and I'm saying, this is from the 7th century BC, and so I'd like to pick a different piece from everything, but that could go on for hours, especially depending on what you're going to say to me. So let's go to the Egyptian section here. And hopefully this will inspire you to make connections in your own mind and in your own experiences, and then those connections can lead to other areas here in the museum, other galleries, other pieces. It's amazing when you spend time really looking at something and then talking about it, how many connections you can make. And one of the most important things I tell the students all the time is, I love my job. I was a teacher for 20 years, but now I get to give everyone 100. Everyone gets an A and everyone gets 100 because you all come with different experiences. Art is subjective, so whatever you see or you interpret or you feel and you like to express is correct, right? We're not really here to school people so much. I mean, we have so much resources that people can do that pretty much on their own. This is really about a communication, a conversation, interacting with others, and the bigger pictures of what that can mean for, you know, our society, our country, and our world, right? Off the soapbox. So, one of the most famous pieces here in the museum, right? Definitely the biggest piece here. So depending on how large your group is, I'd love to talk about one of the Coptic jars. They're very small. If I have 25 students and their children, it's difficult to get around that piece and for them to see. We can all pretty much see this, and we can see the details that I'm about to share with you and we're going to talk about. So, you go to a museum, most people go to a museum. Right? We want to do some deep looking, so let's really look at this piece. And then you're going to tell me just what comes to your mind. What do you like? What don't you like? What questions do you have? What do you understand? What might you want to know more about? And we can take it from there. Also, you might ask me a question that I don't know. You know, and I'm comfortable to say, I'm not really sure. I need to look that up. That's a great question for me to do some research and look at later. I deal with kids, so it's easier. Maybe with adults, you're kind of like, God, put me on the spot. But you can always turn them around and ask them the question, well, what do you think it means? Right? It's a game. And then it's kind of like you're holding that information and you're hoping that they're going to go away and look it up and maybe come back and check it. So what is this? What are we looking at? A coffin cover. This is the lid of a sarcophagus. This is a coffin lid, and it is the lid of a coffin for someone named Hannah Mer. I tell the students all the time, you're welcome to read the label card. There's no cheating in that. But also, without reading it, what can you decipher from just looking at this? Who is Hannah Mer?
Somebody important.
Somebody important. Is Hannah Mer a female or a male?
It's a male.
A male. And we know that in, no, but I'm going to expound on her thought. I'm not going to say no. We know that in ancient Egypt, men did have long hair, right? And later, we do see that men adorn themselves with jewelry and what else? Makeup. But, mascara, right, eyeliner. But yes, this is actually a woman. And I love the idea of talking about the notion of where makeup started and vanity. Vanity started in this civilization, right? Not only were they out to make themselves look really good, but they wanted to make sure they looked really good. So, what's that?
Mirror.
Mirror, right? A mirror. And I was going to ask you, do they get to use handling objects ever?
I'm working on that, yeah.
Okay,
That would be the
because
hope.
one of the things that we do have is a mirror, and that would be nice for people, especially if you have adults, you can go around, let them touch it, feel, kind of see if they can see their reflection. You don't have to have a ton of things, because really the art speaks for itself, but it's nice to have something that's out of the case and they can actually touch. So, this lady, she is obviously someone of importance. And if you didn't read the label, you could actually read some of these images and symbols. What are these images and symbols? Scarab beetle. You see that scarab beetle? If we focus on that black line right there, what's above that is a scarab beetle holding something circular. And then what's below it there?
Wings of woman.
It looks like a woman with wings. Good. So let's look at the first, the above image first, and the scarab beetle. Now, this is a wonderful opportunity to introduce other galleries in the museum. And you can talk about how ancient Egyptians believed that these beetles had the secret to reincarnation, right? Their notion, they see these beetles, these dung beetles, and they see them creating these round sculptures. And these sculptures to them represent their god. Who is their god? The sun god, Ra. So they're observing these beetles, they're creating these sculptures to worship their god. They're going off and dying, and then out of this sculpture, they are reincarnated. So this made these Egyptians believe that this was something magnificent, very valuable. And over there, you can see some amulets, some different scarab. These scarabs can be found on jewelry. They can be found on different ceramics. They're encrusted sometimes. And this was like, to them, their symbol of worship. And really, in reality, it has nothing to do with that. And if you'd like to visit our Dynamic Earth exhibit, you can see that we have an African savanna there. And in the African savanna, you can see dung beetles, okay? Next to large round balls. Do you know what those balls are? What's dung? Shite? The dung beetle goes and collects fecal matter of other animals around the savanna and rolls it in a ball and lays its eggs inside. And why would it do that? For protection, right? These little eggs, there's animals that want to eat those little eggs, and if they're strolling along looking for some eggs, they come along to a nice poop ball, they're going to bypass it, right? So it's going to protect it. Also, the desert's hot, and this is like a little mud pack, right? It's like a little mud ball that's going to keep it nice and cool. And then what happens in the desert at night? Temperatures drop. But that little incubator's been heating up all day, and those eggs are safe inside. Now, the really great thing is that this egg is going to develop to full size before it eats its way out, right? It's a perfect example of recycling, right? And if you want to turn anybody into vegetarians, after you have this conversation, you can point out seafood and bottom feeders and these things. You know, I like to throw that in there every once in a while, just because also it's about the cycle of life. So that's like a really amazing conversation where most people don't realize. So the Egyptians don't know any of this. They're thinking that this is all about worshiping this sun god, this circle, right? And then you can even tie that into the mirror. The mirrors were also circles. We have mirrors now, they're in frames, they're all different shapes, but the idea of the mirror being circle, being the sun and the rise, and then the birth and the death, right? And then when the sun rises again the next day, it's like rebirth every day.
Cycle of life.
Exactly, exactly. So then below, you pointed out this woman who has wings. She also has something in her hand, and her face is turned toward this thing. What might that be?
Instrument.
Maybe an instrument.
Vessel.
Maybe some type of vessel, maybe a flute, maybe some type of a champagne glass, right? Scepter. So, head in there. She is our ancient Egyptian Beyonce. Okay, and she is holding a microphone. She is a singer, she's a priestess, right? And this is what her job was to the royalty. So while she was important and famous, she wasn't royalty. She was someone who, you know, worked for and was involved with royalty, but she's not Cleopatra, right? She's not King Tut. What is this made out of?
Probably wood.
Wood. Also, I don't know how long Hannah Mare lived, but this image of her is very young. And that also plays into the notion that if she's going to be reincarnated, she wants to look like this, right? I heard many times that you are the most beautiful when you are 25. So half my life ago. So I kind of imagine that she's about 25 here. This is also not something that would be able to be created, say, oh, well, she got sick or she got old, she passed away real quick, you know, we've got to create this. This is something that was probably in the works while she was well and alive and much younger. And these different images down here may be prayers about her. They may also tell stories about her personal experiences. Was she married? Was she a mother? These are these images here. And people might right off the bat use words like hieroglyphics, right? And you can talk about also how today's society has been influenced by these ancient civilizations. The idea of exactly. The idea of letters and writing and handwriting. There's also a form of hieroglyphics that are more like a cursive form because printing takes a long time. Writing in script is much faster, right? So this idea of documenting things by writing them down, that's something that we can see throughout the museum. If you go to the Asian Art Gallery and you look at the Wheel of Law, we know that the Buddha's first sermon was carved in there, and that's a great thing to be able to talk about.
A quick question.
Yeah.
Is there any significance to the position of the hands and the arms?
I'm not sure. I mean, I know that the one hand did break off, but I feel like this is a position that we all recognize when someone is laid to rest, right? But I don't know, and that's a great question. That's something that I would definitely look up because if you thought of it, someone else may think of it. And sometimes I hear the same comments, and then every once in a while I hear something new, and that's great, because it also keeps it fresh for you. You know, you don't want to just say the same things all the time. Yeah.
The emblem on her forehead, over her forehead, is that a papyrus?
I don't know, but it looks very much like it, because this mirror has it a little bit on the handle, but some of the other ones have it more obvious. And I think our handling object does, and that's what it would indicate. So it's quite possible.
There are a lot of animals here. I am not able to view the whole thing clearly, but I know the Egyptians revered cats.
Right, absolutely.
Is that anywhere on here? And would it the cat, because they buried?
I don't know, I feel like it's hard for me to identify. These are definitely birds here, like in the center and on the left. But this here, this to me almost looks like a horse or a dog. I'm not 100% sure. This one looks like a ram or some type of a bull. It has antlers.
But they buried their dead with the cats, and I'm thinking maybe the absence of the cat in this, sort of whatever design here is because they actually had the cats with them.
Sure. Oh, that's definitely a possibility, and that's why. And when you have a conversation, it's so much easier for me to move to another piece because you've actually mentioned something that it's not always going to be there, right? But when it is, it's a great way. And they were revered. Most of their animals were revered. So we can even go even further if we were to look here. Here is a sarcophagus of what? What are these? What are these?
The birds.
Birds, exactly. Mummified bird. This one's a sarcophagus. It's got his lid here. So, birds as pets, right? What else what other function did these birds serve?
Music.
Music? What else?
Messengers, sending messages.
Messengers, right? And for my kids, I'll say, what about Harry Potter, right? He uses woodbirds, they know right away, and that's the thing too. I didn't know exactly what we were gonna talk about. I really didn't. I knew that I would come down here and talk about what I'm comfortable with and what I know, but I really didn't know where the conversation would go. I'm glad that it went here because you're helping me. You're feeding me questions and information that we can continue to communicate about. So, the idea, the notion of these birds being messengers for them, right? And these birds being revered and maybe, hopefully, hey, you've been really good service to me. You're gone. Maybe you'll come back, right?
And they're raptors. You can see that in the raptors.
Mhm.
They're great hunters.
Sure, exactly. And they're very strong, they're reliable birds, right? They're not gonna get attacked possibly by these other birds. And then, I mean, you can take, say, number 8, and you can look up the corn mummy and coffin, and you can see, this is 330 BCE, wood, mud, grain, and linen. And those are all great facts, and you can look up a lot about these things if it interests you, and if you already have a little bit of background information. I mean, it would be great to know every single piece in here and every detail about it, but I think if I really was able to do that, I wouldn't probably want to work here anymore. Part of why I love the job is because it's always new and I'm always learning new things. I just was up at Willie G yesterday, and I never noticed that his name is like in the upper right-hand corner, printed in all capital letters. I've spoken that piece more than 100 times with my students, and someone said, oh yeah, there's his name up there, and I said, what? And then I got chills, because I was like, oh my goodness, this is why I love this job. I said, oh, good job, you noticed, good job. So there's that.
And also, children may be standing here and saying, the Nile has been in the news.
Absolutely.
Issues of how the whole way of life
Right.
along here,
Sure.
is being threatened because of dams, and now we have conflict with countries.
Mhm.
I mean, it's really interesting. I mean, so the Egyptian world is studied extensively.
Joanne. You're absolutely right, Joanne, and that's so important because when we want to look at the bigger pictures and the real goals of this museum, the goals are to foster community, inspire conversation, spark curiosity, and all the goals, that the big picture of those goals is that we can have better conflict resolution, and we can have more respect, and we can understand other cultures, and we're aware of what's going on in the news. And if we don't talk about these things and understand them, we only reinforce all these separations. So, how am I on time?
You're good. I think I'll do a couple minutes on Greece and Rome, and
Go for it.
then you input whenever
You go.
you feel like I'm forgetting something. So, as Elise mentioned, we've got a lot of things happening in this space, but there really is a tie-in and a connection to all of it geographically, with their ideals, with their materials that they're using, lots of tie-ins. So I thought what we would do is really quickly kind of look at just both sides. So come down a little further. I want to start with Greece. Because Greece is sort of the birthplace, right, of everything, of civilization, of these ideals, of these religious practices, and then we know that Rome borrows a lot of that. So we're going to start with Greece first. So we give you a little outline. I'm not going to read it all to you because this is rich information that you can experience on your own. But what we pulled out are some essential understandings, some things that you should know about the Greeks. The first one there, they did a lot more than just invent the Olympics. So read through those at your leisure. And then I wanted you to have a nice broad swath of like what we're looking at here. So we have different materials being used. We have bronze, we have limestone, we have clay, we have silver. We also have this nice little bowl down here. Can you all see this little robin's egg blue bowl? It's made, it's called fiance, and I might be saying it wrong, but it's like an early form of a glazed pot. So we have a lot of different types of materials being used. But right here in the center, we have a red figure base. So I thought we could look really quickly at the red figure base. Let's all come around on this side of it. Come around, don't be shy. There's something on both sides, of course, which is wonderful. But what's happening on this red figure base? What's this scene depicting?
Battle.
A battle, a death? What else? What's he holding? Spear, shield.
What's in his left hand?
Which are you talking about?
Oh, so there's multiple figures? So we have multiple figures. You said which he is on his face?
And the different shields have different images on them.
This guy's wearing a lion head. See, his hat, his helmet is a lion skin.
All right, so has anyone here ever heard of the story of Hercules? Yeah? What's the story of Hercules? Who can summarize it for us? Demigod?
He was the strongest man in the
Strongest?
world. Everybody was trying to take him down.
Trying to take him down? What else do you know about?
He had to do 7 things. Didn't he have to do 7 tests of Hercules?
On your last page, I've given you a little, don't read it at the moment, but on the very last page, I've given you a little summary of the story. But yes, this is a really great tie-in for visitors. They know the story of Hercules. You'll notice that he's called Heracles here because the name is a little different. The Greeks and the Romans
It's
like to do it a
also,
little
it's
different.
also on this pot as well.
On this
So
pot
you
as
can
well.
also say to your visitors, there's also another one here, maybe you'd like, because then that's really going to give them the opportunity to really.
Find another one. And these vases, these vessels are really a mode for them to tell stories. So this is, just really quickly, because I know we have to breeze through the Roman side as well. But these vases or vessels would be used for symposia. Do you all know what a symposia was? What do you think of when you hear the word symposia?
Yeah, reading or something.
A reading?
A meeting.
Maybe snooze fest? An exchange of ideas, a big lecture?
A conference.
A conference? So that's what we would have known a symposium to be today, but it was the term, the word, and the ideal is something that's based in Greek practice, which is much of everything that we hold dear today. So on your third page, I've listed just a little brief description of what the symposium would be, which is a time for people to think, to philosophize, to drink, to be merry, to entertain.
But not people.
Not people who, Elise, who?
Men.
Men. And what kind of men? Prominent, right? Important men. And so this vessel here could have been used to create the beverage that they would have drunk. So maybe they're taking this vessel, they're mixing wine, and we know that back then they would have diluted their wine with water. So this vessel, you get your batch of liquid ready, and then you have your prominent men, they're talking, they're reciting poetry, they're having some food and entertainment, and this is the vessel that they can get their drink out of. So it's large enough, I'm imagining you could fit plenty of glasses in there to get nice and full. And it's a pretty deep, we can all look inside of it, kind of. Pretty deep, so it can hold a lot. We have red figure base depicted or on display on this whole right side of the gallery. Each one has a different scene or scenes on them. And it's a really great way to have your visitors look closer, to talk about what they think might be going on. And then in the symposium, they could have used this vessel too to spark a conversation or an ideal, because by having these mythological scenes depicted, maybe they then are kind of viewing it while they're getting their beverages, their drinks, and maybe that's kind of a jumping off point for them to have discussion, to philosophize and to think about the human condition.
And I think it's great also to just consider that coming together for a drink or for a meal is something that we still carry true today, right? And without having to touch on specific religions, you can talk about how these practices and many of these societal practices have carried over into many different cultures, many different religions, many different countries, because these are, like you said, we hold these near and dear because this is the beginnings of
It's the beginnings of everything, right? right? And I feel like this gallery, I want to say it's the beginning of civilization. I don't know that that's a term that everyone would agree with, but it feels like it, right?
Right.
It's controversial,
Right.
but it's maybe not the beginning, but it is an epicenter of a jumping off point
Western
of
civilization.
ideals, of religions, of practices, and something like this space can kind of spark that discussion. It's
So I have a question for you. What age school groups do you tour with?
I do anywhere from pre-K all the way to teachers, all the way through high school. I've done high groups, we do teachers. But essentially, I treat it all pretty much the same. Maybe if I'm talking to the kids, I'm talking a little more animated, but I'm sort of providing the same information, and I'm hopefully giving the same type of experience and opportunity. A lot of times I was telling this to Megan, I won't stand separate from the group. I'd rather stand among you and maybe weave throughout. That way I don't feel like I'm talking to you, I'm talking at you, I'm more talking with you. So that's another tactic that I'll do, and we have children sit down. You might have your visitors bring your stools, you could bring one as well, because then it feels a little less stifled and formal, and it feels more comfortable. And the idea is, you had a good time here, come back. I tell the students, you come with your family, you can do this tour now, right? And you can tell the same thing. You bring your friends. It would be great if you could bring them on the tour with me, but if not, and you want to explore yourself, you have that information. You empower them. This is everybody's museum, right? It's our museum, but it's everyone's museum, and without us, the art is useless.
So my question was leading to, how do you handle the nudity with small children? I know with 8th graders, it was always an
Well, we do the Greek slave. I have a 5th and 8th grade Jersey City right now. We walk past there. I just say, shake the sillies out, let the giggles out now. Half of you have it, and half of you, all of you have mothers or whatever. You know, I'm very real, and you know, I'm in tune to it, and I kind of giggle too, just as long as they're being respectful. If they're being disrespectful, that's going to make me uncomfortable. But I remember asking Sarah, our manager, can I do the Greek slave with 3rd graders? She said, if you feel comfortable, absolutely. And you know what? It's really beneficial to be able to come away, and then they got the point, and you know, there's going to be giggles. I mean, this makes me giggle a little bit, right? Yeah.
Sorry, so when you leave here, do you ever take them out past the mosaic?
Yes, we do. And then that's another thing. I love the tie-in. Like when we were talking about Pen and There, it's a great tie-in. We have some planetarium shows that deal with like Stars of the Pharaohs. I don't know if that show is running currently, but
space in general.
exactly, and the notions of the stars and these things, and then you can go as far as near Andersonville and talk about, you know, the Big Dipper there and the drinking gourd and these things. So it's really about how you can make those connections, but absolutely do go to the mosaic. Love to go to big, powerful pieces too.
There were 3 pieces to that mosaic,
I know.
but we got the best one.
We sure did. We got the boat.
Dolphins.
Yes, and we got the boat.
So even like with this work too, with some of the vases and vessels that we saw in the native arts, you can have a compare and contrast there. You know, similar shapes, similar functionalities, handles, depictions. This is a figural narrative scene, but if we go into native arts, it's more geometric. It's less of a story and more of a pattern. So when you're looking out through this space, always think of what other works in the museum could I tie this into? What other conversations could we be having? I loved when Elise said the scarab beetle and then talked about dynamic earth, which we haven't gone to yet, but at the end, near the end of May, I believe we'll be doing a session on that. So that's also a tie-in as well. Red figure base I touched on. I want to look at Rome really quickly. There's much more in here, so please read this when you have time. Ancient Rome. Some of the big themes here that I think you all can pull from, again, really similar materials, except now we're introducing glass. So we know that Rome is responsible for inventing the use of glass and making things out of glass. We've also got some themes in here about Roman life. We have drinking vessels, so again ties into kind of this idea of the symposia and the merriment and the entertainment. We have some drinking vessels in front of you, like the horn there on the right, the blue horn. And then this yellow one with kind of the bulbous tulip shapes coming off of it. We have some drinking vessels. In this case, though, the one work that I think stands out and is pretty prominent is number 1 there at the top, and that is called the Indian Cup. And that is really, not only is that ancient glass, which is incredible because these glass works, by the way, we have one of the most exceptional ancient glass collections. Many museums don't have this breadth of glass that you can look at. But the Indian Cup is one of the first times that you have a glass maker actually signing their object. So again, most of these are not necessarily made right as works of art. These are useful items. These are a funerary urn, or this is a vessel that's going to be holding wine beverage, or these are votive figurines that are funerary that are going to be given as offering for my religious practice. So we're not really making them with the idea of like, oh yeah, let me make sure everybody knows I made this years from now. But on number 1, for the Indian Cup, we do have a maker, an artist, if you will, who's stamping it with the terminology. When you translate it, says Indian Napian. Indian is spelled E-N-N-I-O-N. And these are very rare. I think there's only like maybe, I want to say 8 of them in the world, but don't quote me. It says 26 vessels made by Indian unknown. But I don't think there's that many even existing still today. So they're very rare. They're very precious. It's if you look, you kind of have to get down and sort of do one of these to really see it, but it's right on the front.
And then it looks like it's here.
And then they've done a little kind of cartoon doodle version of it down there. And it's really interesting that we know that this person wanted someone to know who made this object, right? Another point that I want to note here with the ancient glass is that you're going to notice like on number 7 and number 8, particularly on number 12, that these glass works have a little bit of a patina to them. And a patina is kind of like that nice, pearly looking shade of like kind of swirly, glittery color. And that's not how the work obviously would have been created. That is from these works being buried in the ground, in the dirt, wet, moisture for years and years and years and years, and then it starts to break down. Moisture is the worst thing for glass, and so it starts to kind of seep and leach and create this shiny swirly. So a lot of times when we see these works, we're seeing them much later, much after the fact, so we start to kind of think, oh, this is what they wanted it to look like. Well, that doesn't look, number 7, you go, that doesn't look very great. Why did they want it to look like that? But if you kind of get down and you see they've etched these wonderful, beautiful lines, and you can kind of see it from the outside, but that patina or that swirly color is kind of just changing the way that we see it now. So it's actually a beautiful weathering look to it, but it is weathered. It's not exactly what it should look like. And again, with this cinerator too, you can ask them, like, what do you think this would have looked like when it was first made? Well, they might, after investigating it deeply with you all and having this conversation, they might notice that there's traces of color on here. And so a lot of times with these sculpture, we see them as these, blank pale whites or creams or what have you, but they would have been brightly colored. And so imagine what this would have looked like. What color do you think their outfit would have been? What is it they're holding? What about this wonderful ring that the person is wearing? And so there's a really cool conversation there to be had as well. It's kind of like when you look at these sculptures, these Greek sculptures, and they're all missing arms, and I think over years and years we all think, man, why did they make all these sculptures with all these missing arms? That is so weird. And then you start to have to kind of take your brain back and be like, oh, so they would have had them, but they're so fragile they fell off over time. But we've seen like just these famous works from museum to museum or in your art history books, and you think, that is just so strange. That's kind of the same thing with sculpture. I get so used to seeing these pale, brown and cream colors. I'm like, oh, they would have been vibrant, they would have been bright, they would have been painted, and they would have looked totally different than what we see now.
Well, Daryl's going to be able to touch on that when he brings us into Global Africa. He's going to talk about the headdress and how that is really like that. But also, you can tie in the unexpected color, the glass exhibit that's out right now. You can tie in things in the Valentine House. There's lots of stained glass in there. There's stained glass up in Seeing America on the 2nd floor. We have the Matthew Grant still, the one piece here by the elevator. So again, you have lots of different directions, and then when you get that from your visitor, you're like, you've got an artillery of information.
Exactly. If you were to do and we will go through the glass galleries a few weeks from now, but if you were to do a tour on glass, if that was something that interested you or a reserve group wanted it, absolutely it makes sense just starting here and to give a little bit about like how did this tradition begin. On your packets I have listed very briefly, and then I've also updated our Joseph website with some really nice videos, not only about how these are painted, because this is all in effect used with slip, and slip is just like watered down like clay substance. It almost is like a clay paint. So not only a video on how these are created, which is wonderful, but also a video on how these ancient Romans would have been making glass, because there's a conversation there with visitors, you know, how hot does it need to be to make glass? What do you need to make glass? See what they know, because a lot of them are going to bring more knowledge than you realize, and then talk about how is this innovation taking place. You know, these people that we might see as like, oh, it's ancient, it's years ago, that, you know, but they're building pyramids and they're creating glass that needs to be 2,400 degrees hot, and they're innovating and they're making beautiful things that have lasted thousands of years.
You also have the ceramics room up in the Valentine House where that talks about the different need for different temperatures to fire these different things. And you know, your tour is only what, an hour or 45 minutes, but you hope that the visitor doesn't go, okay, thank you, and then they leave. You know, why don't you go check this out? Why don't you?
Sparking my curiosity. So we have Greece, we have Rome, and then these two cases on the end that say materiality. I'll really quickly touch on those just so you get an idea of what this is. And these are two cases that are kind of blending all the cultures we're looking at in this room and putting them all side by side to show you the similarities and the differences here. So you have some pottery here that's using black slip. I think this would be a really fun conversation to have with the black pottery that we have in Native Arts. You could do, Elise and I were just talking, you could do a whole tour where things are just, with the Willie Cole, with other sculpture and pottery and things that are just solid black.
Malcolm upstairs, yeah, you can just use some, just choose a color.
Choose a color and have a whole tour on a color. Talk about all the different cultures associated with the color and the way they feel. You have glass work as well. You have jewelry, which ties into Egypt, of course, with Elise's talk of adornment and these wonderful, beautiful glass beads that they've made. And then interestingly over here you have, and I mentioned it just briefly on your packet, but you have a little spindle. And this is it's called a distaff, or a distaff, and it's for now I'm going to forget here, spinning yarn. So this is a glass, it's made out of glass, it's beautiful, has a little bird or duck on the end of it, it's really ornate and kind of gorgeous. But it's also a nod back to the utilitarian use of these objects, and that they're using this to spin yarn, and that most of their clothing at this point is made out of wool, so it has this functional use, but it's also just happens to be quite gorgeous to look at. There's much more in the packet to read and to kind of think about. I want to give us plenty of time though for Daryl. Do we have any questions about Greece, Rome, or Egypt? Any overall questions, anything you're like, how would I talk about that? I like the nudity question because that is always one that we have to approach gently. Anything I missed, Daryl or Elise? Anything we should touch on?
You did a great job.
I have a stupid question. Anybody know how many gallons that thing holds?
That's actually a great question. Like, how many does it? I'm not sure. You know, Ulysses did know. Ulysses, he knew.
Oh, I'm sure. At least 2 or 3, right? I mean, that's a huge festival. At least 2 or 3.
Because I think with adult guests, like, how many glasses of wine?
And when I was reading up on the symposia, they were saying that one person was, and I'm going to forget the term, it was like the symposiarch or something like that. One person is the person that's sort of leading the group, and that person gets to decide how much wine is drunk, is what they said. So fact check me on that, but they said, so I can almost imagine, like, we have this big vessel, and everybody's kind of watching this guy, like, okay, he's on his 3rd glass, so we're good, we can keep going. And we're waiting to sort of see and then clue in on how much, and maybe it had to do with how much they had available, maybe it had to do with how much fun they were having.
And I guess they brought their own cup, right, BYOC?
Or eco-friendly.
Just another thing.
Yes.
Looking at this Ramsay bracelet, I have almost the exact same bracelet.
Oh,
So
wow.
I think that when I'm doing a tour, if I'm doing it,
You're wearing it.
and see how.
And then you would be great for a jewelry tour, floor. So we have a jewelry gallery on the second floor of the Valentine House. Why not start out? You know, a lot of times we think go straight to that room, but why not start out in here and talk about early jewelry and how are these made? And this is out of glass. And they're I love Elise's thing about how much they, you know, were involved in movement and making sure.
And the continuity of jewelry over.
And it's continued, you know, it's continued today.
And we have such lovely jewelry in our gift shop. We're selling too, right? But in all seriousness, we have a phenomenal shop. We have things that many shops don't have. A lot of one-of-a-kind, really unique things and really good quality. My son and I purchased earrings for his teacher, and then Sandy said to me, "Oh, I gotta tell you what happened." And you know, I'm like, "What happened?" And she's like, "No, it's good." She goes, "A lady came in and she was looking at the jewelry and she said, oh, I'm a teacher. One of my students gave me earrings from here." And she said, Sandy said, "Oh, Elise and Dominic, that's my son." And the teacher, my son's teacher was like, "Yeah, oh my God." And she's like, "Well, yeah." She's like, "I work with Elise." So like, you know, that's another thing. It's like this 6 degrees of separation. You have these conversations with people. Maybe you're from the same place. You visit. You know the same people. So it just feels so good. So then I told my son. He goes, "I know." He said, "I know." Like, well, did she like the museum? He goes, "Yeah." She said she loved it. She wants to come back.
Oh, nice. Yes. One last question, then we'll move to global Africa.
It's okay.
No, please.
I'm sorry, this is awkward. I've taught Latin for several years.
Yeah.
Middle school. And there were lots of things that I did with the art, and because it's just standard procedure. And when it came to all the nakedness, I would say, all right, this man hasn't been wearing clothes for 2,000 years. He's over it. He's not embarrassed. He's not humiliated. He's perfectly cool. And I would just stare at whoever I had to stare at. But I would make it all about the work of art. She hasn't worn clothes for 2,000 years. She's not cold. She's hot. And I would never say anything about them. I would make it, and they, if you're a little kid in school, one of the things, if you're a kid in school, one of the things, and this is your class, every little kid thinks, there are only 2 kids in here who are any good at art. The idea that I am not good at art, and I have very limited skills, is fundamental.
Absolutely.
And through the course of ancient art, one of the things, it was a pattern that they very quickly picked up. I can't draw a body, I can't do that. And they would start with something relatively sticky, like the Egyptian piece back there. And they would very easily say, and I would say, okay, does this guy know how to do bended knees? Does he know how to make the body stand up all by itself? And they go, no, can't do that. And by the time you get, to this, they say, wow, look what they've learned to do. Mm-hmm. They can make the body do this now. But there's a very much, you can trace it, and they identify with the idea of what you can or can't do. One of the things we used to talk about, you said the arms, because we did Pompeii, so in Hercules, and we blew everybody up. And I would say, okay, you guys, and I would make, this was probably totally unacceptable these days, 10-year-old 7th grade boys. I would say, all right, here's the deal. Things that stick out fall off. Okay? So you got a statue that's built like this, it's built like this. Now, what's going to fall off? And they'd say, your nose. And I'd say, all right, things that stick out fall off, because boobs fall off. The boobs are shaped off, and the nose is shaped off.
Right.
And I said, so if I'm like this, yeah, okay, I'm going to lose my nose, and anything else that sticks out, right? And I said, okay, now you have a statue like this. Things that stick out fall. What are you going to do? Oh, you can shave off the knee, you're going to lose your arm. But I would say things that stick out fall, and I would act them up if that's.
I mean, right behind you is a perfect example.
The guy lying down over here has lost his nose.
Right, this one as well.
Yeah. But if you want things that stick out, fall off, and you act it out,
I love that.
you'll get one set of laughs, and I would get another.
That's wonderful. Well, read through your packet. There's more information there. I tried to put some pronunciations. There are some words and some things that you might go when you're looking at the label. So I tried to include that too. But now we're going to travel. We're actually not traveling that far. We're in Egypt. So we're going to go to Global Africa.
All right, so follow me. We're standing in front of our Arts of Global Africa, and ultimately this is a gallery that for a lot of our school groups they see quite frequently. Yes. Oh, you copied? Okay. In your copy, you're going to have sort of like an overarching view of how to approach a tour in the space, right? So basically essential understandings what your customers or the patrons of the museum should walk away with, right? At the end of your tour, overall general consensus of what pieces are in here. So like what does our collection actually house? So we have items that are ritual, ceremonial, daily use. You saw a lot of daily use items in our Ancient Med Gallery, as well as ritual and ceremonial, popular urban, and fine arts. Now, popular urban is in there because what the curators wanted to do, even with the name change. So our Africa exhibit, if you've been with the museum for a while, was not titled Arts of Global Africa. It had a totally different name prior to. And when the curators redesigned the space and it was moving to the first floor, they wanted to approach it with the mindset of Africa isn't something that just sits in the past, right? So one of the issues we kept running into, like with our Native America gallery, along with the Africa gallery before the redesign of the museum, was that both of those galleries focused or highlighted on a lot of things that were centered around the past. And so that was sort of creating this misconception that Africans as well as Native Americans don't have anything relevant to offer now. So they were very mindful in the redesign of this by introducing more contemporary pieces. So that idea of popular urban or fine arts is added in this collection of things that we house, because not everything you hear is ceremonial, not everything references or harkens back to ceremonial, and not everything is used for everyday purposes, all right? So we're going to start off in the gallery space. So follow me. We're going to start right front. Now, in giving a tour, one of the things I love to tell new educators, or when I'm doing educator professional development for educators, is that the tour is not about you. All right. So one misconception, especially a lot of museum docents, a lot of museum educators also fall into, or trap they fall into, thinking that the tour is about them. It's not about you. You are there to sort of edutain your audience. It's about what they gather from it, their points of entry. There are going to be multiple points of entry they're going to use to be able to identify with that piece, and you want to welcome that, because if you make it so academic, you lose them, right? You want to sort of introduce a snippet of academics, but then keep it fun and exciting, because ultimately your tour can't be all education, right? Education is fine. They're going to go do more research on their own, but you want to just leave them like golden nuggets that they'll follow. So it's like, you know what, I didn't know that. And then give them a reason to want to come back. If you sit there and give them a full-out lecture, which Elise and Megan spoke to earlier, it's very important that you don't put your audience to sleep. So when we approach this, or when we walk through the gallery today, I'm going to kind of walk through it, that perspective. I'm also going to be talking about things that are current in our popular pop culture as well, because this is, after all, Arts of Global Africa. So we want to speak to the relevancy of what that art is to this timeline that we currently live in. People have this idea or this preconception already that museums are boring, right? It's like nothing in there matters to me anyway. I don't even know why I'm here. My wife dragged me or my husband dragged me, right? So with that being said, you want to make it so that they, hold up. So they use things like from the museums or from history in movies. They use things from history and art museums in books or in novels or in other capacities. You mean to tell me diapers or the idea of a onesie came from a dress that men and women used to wear as children? So that idea, because again, a lot of people are unconnected with how something from the past connects to what we're looking at today. So jumping into this piece, I'm going to focus on two pieces because we really don't have time to go too deep, but I'm going to focus on two pieces, and I'm going to start with this piece here, and I'm going to approach it in a similar manner to Elise. As she said, me and Elise, we do this every single day. We're going to approach it from a school program tour. So ultimately, it's going to be a conversation. It's going to be a dialogue, a back and forth. So before I give you details about the piece, I want to know what you see and what are some of the things you observe in the sculptural work behind me. Just name me one detail.
The colors.
Okay, the colors.
The way she's standing.
The way she's standing.
on.
All right. So the colors, the way she's standing, anything else?
The style of dress.
The style of dress, the patterns. You were saying something? Or? The dress, so the style of dress, the patterns.
The movement.
And the movement. So the juxtaposition of the movement, right? The figure isn't just standing still on the rope, but the juxtaposition, like it's a forward motion, yes.
But if you were on a tightrope, you wouldn't be wearing shoes.
So there's a detail that sort of doesn't sit well, right? If we're thinking about this being something that would be a functional piece, or something that this was actually happening in real life. Anything else we notice or observe? Anything else?
No head.
No head. The obvious thing, right? There's no head on this sculpture, right? So how does the figure even know where it's going or where it's walking, right? Now, unlike Ancient Med, did the head fall off? No, right. So the head didn't fall off. That was an intentional thing done by the artist, and we'll get into that, into why a little later. Anything else we notice?
What she's wearing under the dress.
What the undergarments, right? So that also plays a role because that sort of helps us to maybe timestamp when this sculpture, or what the reference the sculpture is being pulled from. Anything else? Anything else we can see?
How is it on the tightrope?
Yeah, the balance. So now what you're noticing is we're also getting questions back. This is why this dialogue in the beginning matters. If you notice too, I'm also repeating back everything you're saying because acknowledging your audience matters, right? You got to make sure that they understand that they're heard. You got to make sure that they understand that they are the reason you're here. So acknowledging you all of your thoughts. It also, as an educator, makes me think about what you're saying, and I'm not just brushing past what you're saying, right? And that brings us back to the question. Now it's causing questions to bubble up, which as an educator, that's what you want, because then it's going to lead you to what you want to talk about, which is the piece ultimately in itself. So one of the questions we have that came up, how is this connected? How is it sitting or propped up like this? So we have one question. Any other thoughts or questions we might have about the piece?
She has hardly any flesh.
So she's very, very slender. Yeah, very slender. There's not a lot of extra flesh.
Skin
No, it's not showing much.
Oh, skin. Also, no visible skin. Got you. So no skin visible. There's little to no flesh visible. So question: why do you think? Well, since we're there, why do you think that was? Why did the artist go there? Because if we're in Arts of Global Africa, is this something we would traditionally think Africans would maybe wear?
No,
Maybe not,
but
right?
the cloth looks so traditional, and that's the question.
So
That's the tension.
so we have this tension of, hold up, so the fabric makes me think Africa, right?
Oh, yeah.
But the style of clothing does not match traditional African garb. So now we have these again, like you said, this juxtaposition. What is this all about, right? Any other questions we can think about? Or comments and things that we see.
How does it stay balanced?
How does this stay balanced, right? So it can come back to my friend about construction. How is this thing propped? How does this thing stay balanced? Why is it like if I'm jumping up and down, why doesn't it shake, right? So how did the artist actually construct it? Anything else?
She's wearing a dress that is not appropriate for the thing that she's doing and holding dressed like as if she's...
So the style of dress would not, I mean, if you're going to walk on a tightrope, the last thing you may want to do is walk on it with a full-fledged dress with layers. Then you have one of the pants underneath along with the stockings. Might make you a little more uncomfortable, especially if you're already nervous and you're sweating, right? So with that being said, the clothing isn't conducive to the activity, right? So as you just saw, I gave you a large breath, right? I gave you a large breath to sort of think about what we're looking at. Make your own observations. I'm highlighting what it is that you see, and then I'm also allowing you the opportunity to give me questions so that I can then answer those questions. I'm going to talk about those things regardless, but you don't know that if you were just my viewing audience, right? So I want you to lead the conversation so that way you find the tour more interesting. It's much better than me saying, well, this piece was created by Yinka Shinabare. Yinka Shinabare was an artist from the, like, no one wants to, like, that makes the tour very dry, and then it's like I'm talking at you and we're not having that dialogue or that conversation. So now jumping into answering your questions, right? So talking about the questions as to why. So let's get into the clothing aspect of it, right? So we talked about the African style of the dress, or fabric print of the dress, but however the style of the dress doesn't matter. Do we have any fashionistas in the group that can maybe tell me what cut or what style of dress might that best match to? If we were to make the top or make the whole dress black, what style of dress? Very Victorian, Downtown Abbey. So right away, if we were to just imagine in our minds, like, hold up, all black, that's the Victorian style dress. Ha, ding, ding, ding. So that's one thing. So we know the dress has a Victorian or a European flavor to it, right? Now, the print itself, let's get into the print and let's dissect that a little more. Now, we talk about popular pop culture, right? So there are a lot of things in popular pop culture that can help us assess the fabric itself. Now, we live in 2020, right? That's the timeline we live in, right? However, this artist, if they're already tapping or harkening back to the Victorian period, there may be some other layers of history embedded in this piece, right? So thinking about the print itself, we think traditionally African, right? So one point of reference we can maybe use is maybe think about the movies and the movie theaters, the movies that are in the movie theater. Are there any movies that have been heavily influenced by Africa as of recently? Maybe in the past 5 or 6 years. Oh, you were so brilliant. Absolutely, yes. So Black Panther, the irony behind that movie is that it was thoroughly researched before it was put out there for the public to consume. The director wanted to be thoughtful in every aspect of that movie. So how many of us have seen Black Panther? Anybody seen Black Panther? So we have a few. All right. So this might be a great homework assignment for those who may not have, right? Because it gives you some insights to some traditional African garb. All right. So the costume director, who also won several Oscars, FYI, she goes all the way back to Spike Lee's movies and has done movies for Spike Lee, and also produced fashion for the Black Panther movie. Ruth Carter, she just won an Oscar for Black Panther. She made sure to do our diligent research in finding out what tribes would wear what fabrics. For those who saw Black Panther, do any of us recall seeing prints that looked exactly like this?
I don't think so.
Yeah, you don't think so, and some don't remember? All right. So with that being said, we did not. And there's a reason, right? So we think about the story of Black Panther is special because that space, or the Wakanda where the fictional characters live, was kept, for those who watched it, was kept what? Secret, isolated. No one knew, which means that it was uninterrupted by colonization. So everything in that bubble would be traditional what? Traditional African garb, right? The only fictional thing about Black Panther would be Wakanda. We know Wakanda doesn't exist, right? And so Wakanda, unfortunately, there's not a real place in Africa. And of course, there's no special guy with special powers who gets his powers from this special. That doesn't happen either. However, from the woman tribes, right? So the tribes, the all women tribes, their wardrobe, their costume, there were women tribes in Africa that were very similar to the women-led tribes here in North America and Native American tribes, and they were the matriarchs, right? That's accurate, even down to the clothing they wore, as well as the other characters we see in the film who are wearing traditional kente, right? They're wearing other traditional African fabrics. We don't find this fabric in Black Panther because this particular fabric was introduced to Africa through what?
The Dutch.
Through the Dutch and because of this, so through colonization, the Dutch was able to then introduce this fabric. So this artist is kind of doing a very layered thing here, right? Yeah. So it's Arts of Global Africa, right? We're in our Global Africa. However, we have a Victorian style dress, a Dutch wax fabric, right, that is brought over, and that Dutch wax fabric is, in our current timeline, we would associate that to be traditional African garb, but that's only because we're so many years, removed from when that garb was first introduced. So it's almost like American culture. We think about country music, right? So country music is a big thing. That's an American staple. However, if you go to certain parts of Asia, country music is also just as equally popular, right? Just like hip hop, right? Hip hop is also American. That's where it started, that's where it originated. However, if you go to Asia, you find parts of Asia that is heavily saturated in hip hop, and you would think that it started in Asia. But over time, for those who may be growing up in those spaces, or even Americans who are growing up in this generation, they may not be clear on the original or the origin of those things because of the timeline that they were born in. So going back to the piece, so Yinka Shinabaré was mindful in the style of dress. He also not only was mindful in the cut or the style of dress by harkening back to the Victorian age, he also made sure to use a print that we would associate with Africa, even though it's not traditional African garb. So bringing us back to the head, why headless? That was another thing you all brought up or highlighted.
No identity of the person.
No identity of the person.
Lack of self-determination.
Maybe lack of determination, self-determination. Any other thoughts on why the figure itself is headless?
And also the colonization, they didn't recognize.
So not being recognized, not being seen by the authoritative power that is now taking over the space. Any other thoughts?
Maybe because there's so many faces in the African diaspora that putting a specific one on would make you go towards that.
That's a strong point. So in Africa, Africa is huge, right? With large ethnic, the many multiple ethnic groups that are represented within the space. And so by putting a face on, you take away from or negate another group of people that may have lived or that may represent or be represented by Africa. Any other thoughts of
Well,
why?
I think the whole idea of balance, in terms, it's almost like this figure is going into the unknown. Can't see where they're going.
Okay.
Not really appropriately dressed for where
their
they're
journey.
going.
Yeah.
But yet and still walking through.
Okay, so that idea of pushing forward, even though there's that idea, I don't know what I'm walking into, I'm unsure what the journey might take me. I see 3 more hands, so I'm just kind of go in a row.
Yeah, so you say like balance. Because if you look at it, it's kind of like the dress, the print, the colors are so bright.
Yeah.
So you'll see that person from
Far away, yeah.
At the same time, they're kind of invisible.
Okay, so this is about being visible, invisible, right? So the idea, the figure, you see me, but then you don't, right? What were you going to add on?
I was going to say, if you see a face, you tend to go there first, and I don't think that was the point of the piece.
So all of the points you hit on are excellent. However, harkening back to the idea of if we had a face, that would be the first thing we would be trying to look at, right? Figuring out who this person is. When that's really not what matters about the piece. It matters more so is what is this person doing? And
The balance of the arm, very ballet
Mhm.
pose, but the holding of the dress,
Uh-huh.
very Victorian dance pose,
Mhm.
1 foot up,
Mhm.
stepping forward, like my colleagues, friends have said.
yeah. Moves up. I saw one more hand in the back, wasn't it? One more hand? Yes.
But the figure is balanced without a head. How do you balance without your head? It's on the leg, and you can, the whole torso is moving as though it still has the head.
Great point. So you have this figure here that's headless, however, it's still jetting forward. And we know, of course, we all know when we think about balance, right? Our head is the heaviest part of our body, right? So that head, even though we might not be aware of how much balance our heads bring to us, for those science people in the room. So that's another great thing. Again, we're talking about multiple galleries. We have multiple galleries that connect that back. Makerspace is one of those spaces.
What I'm getting from this is like life
Uh-huh.
is a balancing act. And
Okay.
here we are, and I'm forced to wear the garb of colonization, but yet I'm able to put my own stamp on it with the colors.
Yeah.
But yet it's just balancing everything to try and get by.
Okay, all right. I like how you approach that. Now I want to hear you, and then I'm gonna kind of bring it home. Yeah.
I see it as representing the past and the future.
Past, okay.
Past of how the history of Black, like African American, like westernized by force, losing head, but still try to go forward in that.
Despite that.
Despite that, with a hard situation.
Okay, all right. So okay. Maybe I could take 2 more, and then I'm gonna bring it on home. All right, because I want to hear what you have. You look like you have juicy stuff.
Maybe
So
the reason there is no head is because, piggybacking on what you said, that the head is heavy.
Yeah.
All of the past is in that.
That's
So
the
in
thought
terms of
system.
moving forward on this tightrope, you take off that
Snap to
heavy,
that. Yeah,
heavy piece
Yeah.
and move forward without it.
Yeah, because you're right. A lot of times we're trapped in our own trappings, right? We were bullied as a kid, so we think everybody's always talking about us as an adult, right? So that's the thought process. What were you going to add on?
You know, the more I look at the patterns and the colors, I think of spirit. I think there's in the reds and the yellows. It's just something that is very uplifting. And it's sort of coming out and breathing out at you in spite of the colonialization, the lack of identity. And there's such grace in this position also. Look at the hand.
Yeah.
It's just so, there's something very beautiful. And I think also the fact that they chose, or the artist chose to make this figure, like somebody said, like a ballet dancer. It's just something there about the spirit.
That is really, really, really. So this is one of my favorite pieces. So I like
Say it, spirit. I'm gonna say it, or am I gonna say it?
So Yinka is one of Yinka is one of my favorite artists, and this is not the only piece we have in our collection. If you've ever been to the Valentine House during the holiday time, you may have seen some of his other works, and you know it because of his trademark headless figure, right? So that's something he uses through it with a lot of his figures. However, there are sculptures where he does have heads on them. There's one cool one at the Brooklyn Museum where there's like this astronaut kid that's upside down. That was what looks like they're walking on the wall, or walking on the ceiling, I should say. So he's known for doing both, either with or without, but this is a trademark of his, having figures headless. Now, what if I told you everything you said is valid, and everything you said is accurate, especially when we talk about the history of the dress, we talk about the history of the fabric, and then picture this, the artist says, I don't have an interpretation. I created this so you all would have your own interpretation. That is exactly right. And then mic drop. That is what Yinka does with his pieces. So, of course, he's referencing history, right? He does it so well. He'll highlight something from history, negative and or positive, depending on your lens, and then he leaves it for the audience to interpret. This is what makes art so dynamic, because we all connected on it in our own way. Art is so subjective that despite all of our many different backgrounds, we're all probably from different places across the globe. I know I'm from the South originally. So with that being said, like all of our different experiences we brought to this one moment, and we all were able to connect and be able to like relate to this one piece with our different experiences. And that's the ultimate goal of your gallery tour. That's the ultimate goal of the museum experience, and why people want to come back. They want to come back because they want to feel that connection. Now, oh, you understand where I'm coming from. You see it like I see it. Even though you might be a doctor, you might be scientist, right? You might be working something totally different, something totally abstract, but it doesn't matter. School teacher meets doctor, but you all come together on this one thought, on this one viewpoint. So again, really cool piece. Yinka is really big on like not having a written meaning out. But of course, on here it speaks about the Dutch wax fabric. It goes in that detail, but it really is no like harkening or detail about what the piece is about, because he leaves it open for interpretation. All right,
Daryl,
yes.
You told me, and you didn't mention it, but some African tribes believe that the soul
Yes,
resides
you're
in
right.
the head.
Yeah.
So that could be part of it. And
Yeah.
then the other part, what about Yinka himself?
Yeah. Yinka is disabled. That's another.
He's
and
a quadriplegic.
And he's
in a wheelchair, and he
yeah.
can't move from the neck down.
Yeah. And the interesting thing is, so
how does he do it? How does he do it? How does he do it?
With a computer?
How does he do it?
Wow,
How does
what do you
he conceptualizes this whole thing, right? Everything. And I'm only saying this because he taught me everything.
She's right.
He conceptualizes all of this. The patterns on there, very specific. These ladies were pointing out light bulbs and electric sockets. And that's to make you think about the different Western influences that Africa and the countries of Africa have experienced. Are there electric in all countries of Africa? Is this something that they have, right? But how does he do this?
Does he do it like Stephen Hawking?
How else could he do it? What does this need to be functional? It needs you, right? So he needs a community of people. So that's another wonderful tie-in.
The working together. Now, construction, you did have questions about how it was put together. So I feel I need to let you all know that. So that's the sort of the aha. So the rope itself is actually made out of, the rope, I should say, there's twine wrapped over top of an iron bar, right? So there's an iron bar that runs across, and then there's an iron rod that runs through the foot of the figure, and it sort of works as the armature for the sculpture itself, and it's welded to the iron rod that's at the bottom. So it creates that perfect balance. I sometimes like to mess with my mathematicians who are really like, there's a way to do this mathematically. However, I don't know how to do that, but there is a way to do this mathematically. It's almost like, so what, if I was writing the equation for this, how would this look? And they always look at me like, so, but there is a way to do the balance this mathematically with the weight and everything. But no, this is iron and iron forged together, and then the armature is put over top.
So he has the artist has a group.
A team, so think of it kind of like Kende Wale. So Kende Wale is another prominent African American, or is Kende Wale from?
He's African
artist. And so with that being said, he has a team that paints his paintings now, these massive paintings. Even though he is fully healthy and fully functional, he still conceptualizes it. And so when you get to a certain level as an artist, I'm not there yet.
Like when you're a chef,
my artwork for me, or a chef,
chef.
So when you get to a certain level, you no longer are the one actually doing the work. You conceptualize it, and then you pay or charge someone to do it.
So Wynwood Walls in Miami, Florida, the best artists come with 20 people.
Yeah.
They conceptualize
Yeah.
it and they draw, but there's one wall that the artist did all by himself with spray cans.
Oh, wow.
The way that people used to do street
Yeah.
art. But it's the same thing, the community that
Yeah.
they put together
Yeah.
to do their well-constructed art.
Yeah, and there's something to be said when you can look at a piece of work and say, you know, it has something to do with that. Our high school interns, we have an internship for those who may have nieces, nephews, or children who would like to work here at the museum, but we have a high school internship program, and they actually construct or make mini installation for the museum. So that's something that they get to do as a part of their 4-year program being in the museum, and that's something cool to say, like, I had a hand in creating this piece of work that sits in the museum that all people are able to see and able to benefit from. So I don't want to stay here too long because I want to make sure that we get to the other second piece. But as you walk through, so in this package you have, not only do you have, as I highlighted, the first page, but once you get past that, you also have a section here for questions to ask, right? So that's always one thing. What do I ask, right? So I gave you general questions that you could ask about the space and why, you know, these things matter, right? And in case you're an educator and you have like one of those, I call them brain farts, that's, I have no other word for it. But you have a brain fart moment and you don't know what to talk about because you did all this research, you came prepared, then you get there and all of it goes out of your brain. So it's like, oh no, what do I do? Refer to your questions. You can refer to your questions, and as you talk, I guarantee you it's happened to every educator, especially for my retired educators that might be in the room. You can speak to this as well. You've been in front of your class or you've been in front of your group and bloop, it just goes away. But going back to your VTS, which is kind of what I did there, that visual thinking strategy, what do you see? What are some of the things we observe? That gives you a breath to sort of collect yourself, take in a deep breath, and then they start to create the questions for you. And then you have your trusty, you can put this on a little index card and keep it in your back pocket. And that way, if you ever are stumped, just pull the questions out and you'll be able to speak to the questions directly, all right? Now, on the other side of that sheet, you have this nifty little thing, which you probably also got in your Ancient Med packet, but top 10 list. So this is basically like a top 10 list of facts about our Africa galleries, about our collection itself. It also breaks down a couple of pieces like Man with Bicycle, which is that piece there, the apron here. It also talks about the Efa headdress, which we're about to talk about in a couple of seconds, and a few other pieces that are normally on display in this gallery. They do rotate out items as within the museum. However, at least one or more of these items will still be on display even as they rotate them out. They typically rotate out more so the contemporary pieces because of the materials that are used. They need to rotate those out more frequently. So we're going to make our way through and we're going to come to the middle here. So we went from something very contemporary to something that's a little more ceremonial, something that would have an actual function, something that's not just there for aesthetics, right? So we're going to just kind of circle up around this piece here.
I love it.
What I also did, well, I'll get to that at the end. We'll finish this and then I'll walk you over there and give you that last little tidbit. So jumping into the piece in the middle, right? You approach it in the same manner, right? Because again, remember, your tour is never about you. It's always about your audience. So you want to find out what they want to talk about, what they want to explore. So what are some of the things we observe? What are some of the things we see? So you said we see some big, I missed that back.
It's a big piece.
It's a big piece in general, a huge piece, right? What else?
Seems to be resting on mother head.
So it's resting on the head. You're highlighting mother, children. So there's some type of idea of family, right? Or some type of idea of community. Any other things we see? So there's a rider. There's a rider that's sitting on what? Do you see? How do you know he's riding?
Is a horse or a donkey?
A horse. So we have this horse, and there's this figure like riding on top of this horse. What were you saying or highlighting?
That was what I was saying.
Oh, same.
But there's a child, looks like a child.
So there's like a child or a kid in the front part of the harness that's in front of the larger figure in the middle. And feel free to walk around it so you can really get into all the details. The position. So we have, musicians, I'm sorry. So there's not only family here, but we have people who are also holding musical instruments. Anything else?
I'm getting the Easter Island vibe. You know those big heads on Easter Island?
Yeah, definitely. So there's some referencing to other other cultures, other places, yes?
The headpiece has somebody wearing a headpiece.
So the headpiece has somebody wearing the headpiece, all right? So right away, we already know that this is a mask, sounds like. So we've already deciphered that this is a mask, which means that this is something that will be worn. If you were not aware, if you look in the front, you can see there's little 2 peepholes right there for the eyes so that you can actually see, right? Moving forward. So a headdress with someone wearing a headdress for someone to wear while we have a figure on the top wearing a headdress. Anything else? Anything else we observe? The levels, so there's multiple levels, so it's like a tiered system almost. Anything else we observe?
They got like 3 colors, right? There's red, there's green, there's black.
So there are like 3 colors in the state that it is now, going back to the idea when we talked about ancient man earlier. Initially, if we imagine how it looked in its original state, very bright, very colorful. But again, over time, the colors fade just like anything else, and this is what we're sort of left with. Anything else?
It looks so heavy.
It looks heavy. How much do you think it weighs? That is the question. How much do you think it weighs?
68 pounds.
68 pounds. Any other thoughts? Very specific. Any other thoughts? You say any other thoughts on
I would say 150.
150?
150, wow.
All right. So that's the thought. Someone is wearing this on their head, on shoulders, right? It's resting on their head. And we are gauging it to be somewhere between 68. We said 60 or 58? 68. And then 150, right? Somewhere between that. So the actual weight of this piece is 50 pounds.
Oh.
So 50 pounds. It seems so much heavier, right? But when we think about the material, so why would it be a little lighter? What is it made out of? Because I would imagine, right, wood. So because it's wood, yes. So the wood, because it's wood, it's a little lighter than if we were thinking like iron or we were thinking some type of metal or rock, right? So it's made out of wood. So the materials is why it's only 50 pounds. How do you think it's made? So we talked about materials. How do you think the artist creates this piece?
It looks like it's one piece.
Right, is it cut from?
You all are so brilliant, I can't get anything past you all, right? So you're absolutely correct. It is one piece of wood that the artist carves into and whittles out all of those figures and whittles out all of those characters. Again, even the art in making this mask is something where the artist is trained. It's not something you just dive into. So you have the artist that's trained to create the mask, but you also are the person that will perform with this mask on is also trained in how to wear it because they need to be able to balance the weight while they are walking in the procession, and in some cases they're actually dancing as well. So you have to be able to balance that weight, and they start them training off very young. So again, what else can we find?
What are the little, like, staples?
So those little latch work, right? So you have to think about going back to weight, right? And being able to actually put the mask on, right? So the idea of it being able to be placed on the head and being able to fit securely on that person's head, that's what you see the extra details for, all right? Any other thoughts? Any other questions or things we observe or see?
Well, the horse, the pony, the head, the animal is ceremonial headdress, right?
Yes.
It's got like a little thing going on.
The guy holding both, whatever, the shelves or...
So yeah, so it's almost like it's almost like he's pulling these shells. You can see his hands on the inside there, sort of like holding both or bracing both of these sides together. So the figure in the middle, the central figure in the middle is a warrior. He's would be sort of think of the commander-in-chief of that army, right? And this is actually considered a warrior mask, all right? So all the other people are people that would be associated when we think about going into battle, right? In some cases, when you think about battle, especially battles from, we think ancient Egypt or we think ancient Rome, you may have that in the beginning to sort of march ahead of the army troops processioning in, and then behind the little band you have the massive army, right? So the band is sort of announcing that the army has arrived, and then all of the soldiers are there ready to, go into battle. So again, that idea of the central figure, he's only as strong or only as durable as his team that surrounds him. So he can't accomplish the goals of being this strong warrior and winning the battle without his team assisting or aiding him.
So this is like a flag or an emblem?
So yeah, you have so they're like details that speak specifically to the particular tribe. Unfortunately, I'm not that knowledgeable about what specific tribe, and I don't want to give you misinformation, but this is again where you have to be honest with your audience. If there is a question like that comes up, and say, you know what, let's delve into that deeper deeper maybe at a later time. Or, you know what, we're going to be looking at 2 more pieces. If you want to quickly Google or research that for me while we go, we can delve more into that once you found it on your iPhone, because everybody has an iPhone or a cell phone now. Yeah.
I don't, what do they, oh, sorry, excuse me. You mentioned that the person that would have been carrying this headdress was trained.
Yeah, so think of it almost as if you were a dancer being taught modern dance or ballet. You don't start off with tendus and relevés. You start off with your basic first position, second position, third. Yeah. So with that being said, it's like you start off little steps, right? And then as you work your way up, so the mask itself would not be this initial 50-pound mask. It would have started off as a lad or a kid. They would have started off with maybe like a 5-pound, 10-pound mask, and then building up their endurance, kind of like a football player or any other athletic person. You build up your tolerance.
So this person was a very important person in
They would, I mean, being pre-selected, you would have been I mean, there is some sense of importance to that. However, it's more about this. It's really not about the person wearing a mask, but more about the community that it would be attached to. Because again, it's the idea of community and the idea of fellowship. So while they would have been an important or integral part, it's really about, again, the community and how that role in the community. Yeah.
Was this piece, I want to know where they keep this and what they did with it. They weren't wearing it.
That's a great question. So from my understanding, they would have been housed in a special space, and then it would have been brought back out for the ceremony, as they redo the ceremony later on, following the next year. There was another question.
I thought, was this made for a specific person, like so each warrior had this piece or something? There's like wife and kids.
So yeah, so that part I'm unsure about, because there are multiple people wearing multiple masks during the ceremony. So I'm not sure like if the masks are specific to that individual or to that you know, is their general blood or the army, like was it their father? I'm not sure. But yes, there are multiple masks that are created, and there are multiple masks that are worn during the ceremony. So again, and that's where it goes, it harkens back to that idea of community and why one individual isn't more important than the others, because there would have been multiple individuals wearing the same mask. So really, really cool piece. This is a piece we do with our early learners. Our early learners really get into this, especially, you know, you think about the preschoolers and our 2nd and 3rd graders, because it's something they can identify with. And you can approach this from multiple angles. You have the idea of community. You have the idea of how a community is set up, people that are there to protect you, people that are there to educate you, because you see people holding books in this space as well as people that are there to play music. All of these things are parts that speak to our rich communities and how diverse our communities are. So right away, even for the little ones, they're able to take something away, because their point of entry is going to be what they know, right? So they're not going to be as knowledgeable as we are. However, they know what a policeman is, they know what a teacher is, they know what a musician is, and they're able to pull those things right away when they look at this piece. Now, there are a lot of other cool pieces in this space, and we do get to those pieces when we're talking to our groups depending on the age demographic. I've done tours in this space as young as preschool, as old as my, I don't say as old, that sounds so horrible, but as old as my educators that come through. It is, all right? So I say that because I have a professional development tomorrow with teachers from Mount Clair. And college kids, we also work with college kids as well. But I say that to say that you can really do any one of these pieces with any age level. It really doesn't matter. Some people are like, that's too kiddie for grown-ups, but there's always something to learn. There's always something to pull out. I want to highlight one last thing, and I'm not going to talk about it. I just want to show how it's important to sort of have this reference key in the back. So on the last sheet I gave you some Adinkra stamps, right? So these are Adinkra emblems or Adinkra symbols. They all have different meanings, all right? And the reason I thought this is important to include in your packet is because so many of our pieces are connected specifically to Nigeria and specifically to the Yoruba people. And Adinkra stamping comes from Yoruba and the Nigerian people. So they have that overlap, even though each piece doesn't have that. When we look back at the crowns in the background, those crowns, especially the very brightly colored blue one, you'll see the Adinkra symbols on the sides, and you'll see, and right away, that should let you know, Nigerian, Yoruba, without even reading a label. So once you are able to recognize or identify some of these symbols, when you look at certain works, it'll become second nature, including the lingua staffs that we see here. There are symbols up here that are also very Nigerian, very Yoruba. And then what I want to take you is to one of our larger scale pieces, which is completely covered in Adinkra symbols. again, contemporary. So something that is from the past, right? The Sadiqa stamping is a tradition that has been with the Yoruba people forever, right? We see it in this very modern work, right? This is a very modern, very contemporary work. It's a beautiful piece, but it's something to think about that each one of these symbols has a different meaning, right? And that meaning houses a lot of power, because we think about symbols for us in America, and we think about the American flag and the power that that holds. We think about our men and women who fight in our military, and when they get those certain ranks, like I'm from a military family, the power and the energy that those symbols and those rankings hold, right? So again, thinking about how symbol and symbolism can be very specific to a culture and hold a lot of power and a lot of strength, and then seeing how contemporary artists, modern artists from today, and take that knowledge of their past and infuse it with very contemporary themes. So a really, really cool piece. If you notice, there are 3 figures here. Just highlighting the 3 figures. You have a gentleman here. You also have a gentleman here in the middle, and then there's a gentleman there in the back that's sort of kind of cut off at the top. And again, that idea we talk about nudity. Again, kids do notice that the figures are new. I love what you spoke to over there. I'm probably going to use that as well when I move when I do my school programs. But again, it's you have to address it if it becomes a topic. If it doesn't, then you just scale past it. But it's good to address it if you do need to address it. But there's so many cool things in this space. Very modern contemporary pieces hanging right above our head. I love that one. There's so much I could talk about, but I'm running out of time. And I know Megan's like, okay, Daryl, let's wrap this up. So,
Adinkra, can you spell that?
Adinkra, yes, I believe it's Adinkra. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I was about to check the labels to make sure. You saw me digging my head like, oh God, this is where I go wrong. So thank you so much for that. Now, is there any other questions, or does anybody have any else, any input that they would like to add?
This was fabulous.
Oh,
yeah,
I'm so glad you enjoyed. I enjoyed you all. You all were. So one thing, and this may happen to you. You may be doing your best tour, and that group gives you nothing, right? And that's okay. Don't lose your momentum. Don't get discouraged. Some groups are just not chatty. Some groups are just going to be like,
Type 4. Those type 4 people.
Yeah, exactly.
What if?
Exactly. So if that happens, right? Don't close up. I don't want you to ever close up and think it's something you did, because as educators, you know, we all like the validation of our groups walking away with smiles on their faces. And if our group walks away kind of like, and they were like this through the whole tour, you don't know whether it was good or bad. And I know that validation does matter, but I don't ever want you to get discouraged, because as a fellow educator, it matters to hear that response back that you all loved it, and I'm glad you all loved it, but also prepare yourselves for those audiences that are just going to give you nothing. And that may or may happen. It may or may not happen. It depends. All right?
Fingers crossed it doesn't.
I pray it doesn't, yeah. I think in this museum, I've been here now for almost 8 years, welcome to my 9th year. So I've been here for like 8 or 9 years roughly, and I think I've had that happen maybe twice. Where I was like, and surprisingly, one group was a teenage group, and then the other group was an older group. So it was like, I don't know if it wasn't, you don't know, you can't gauge it or you can't call it. But again, just be prepared and just never get discouraged, all right? All right, you all were awesome.
Thank you, Daryl.
Thank you. This is why me and Elise, we love the tag team of tour together.
You do.
Thank you, Elise. One more time for us.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. It was really my pleasure.
And this isn't the last time we're going to hear from them, because later on in the trainings, we've got a couple other sessions where we'll be calling on
And we're a
them.
resource for you
Yes.
too. So our office is right near Megan's. We're in the suite right after us. You're welcome to come up if you need resources, ideas, you have questions. Just want to say hi.
And feel free to say hi. And one of the things I would be remiss if I did not highlight, we have a lot of cool public programs. So if you're going to be working with us, we encourage you, even if you just want to volunteer, you don't want to like turn up with us. Volunteering, we always need the extra hands. Megan is one of our public managers, but Stephen is our other public programs manager, and I work with him quite closely. And we have the upcoming March 26th. We have our Art After Dark series, so that starts March 26th. Essentially, it's a welcoming of the community to come hang out with us. We'll have refreshments, our cocktails, food, beverage, and the cool thing about the one happening on March 26th is called The Body Electric. So we're going to be bringing in DJs. So there'll be 3 DJs, and we'll be doing what's called a silent disco. So you'll have your earphones on, and no one knows what DJ you're listening to. You can choose what DJ you want, right? So if you're dancing on beat, no one knows because they don't know who we've been listening to. So with that being said, it's a great space for all ages. Our last big event, our last Art After Dark was celebrating the life and legacy of Jerry Gann.
Y'all remember that when we got out of training and the party was pumping?
So that's what we expect. And you'll see it was a wide array of demographics, a wide array of different people from the community. So I don't want you to ever feel like, well, I don't know if that's for me. Everything here
And if you
is
go
for
to
you.
it, too,
Yes.
if you go to the public program too, then when you're on a tour, people are like, what else can I do? What other stuff do you all offer? Now you can speak to it because you've been to one. So you can be like, oh, well, depending on who they are, what they're interested in, you can say, you should come to Art After Dark, or you should come to our lecture series, or you should come to our
Pop-up
films,
poetry.
or pop-up poetry.
Yeah.
So coming to it, the description that you read and like the image online is always different than actually being there.
Quick question, I know that you said that we're going to have shadow opportunities.
Yes.
Can I shadow you?
Well, and that's what I was going to say.
We
Megan
wanna
and I,
offer
we've
an
been talking
opportunity.
about it, so hopefully you can join us on one of the
Because even though
school
they're
tours, just
doing
so you
school-
can see the difference.
And the dynamics of how different it is.
Yeah, because like they both said, like it's just because they're doing it for students and kids, that does not mean that technique does not work with all ages, because it absolutely does.
And
So I
then
think
you
we'll see
also,
that.
I didn't mean to cut you, but
No,
then
go
you also get to see the different techniques we do. So we didn't explore all those techniques. We have in-gallery activities that we do that you can do with your groups if they become, so if you get that group to, right, then let's change it up. Let's do conversations in art. Let's do blind drawing or soundscape, right? So these are activities we do in the gallery that force them to have to participate. And you, like with the blind drawing activity, essentially you're partnering up the group with the partner, and they're being escorted into a gallery. One person can see the artwork, one person can't. And then that person that can see the artwork has to sketch or draw what the person is seeing, and they can only use their words. So now you're like, I'm not even going to work. They're going to do the work, right? But in doing the work, right, they get to get a deeper look at the work, because now they have to pay attention to the details, and it forces them to loosen up a little bit and like get that dialogue flowing. So there's so many cool things you'll get to see if you do get the shadow.
I think what we'll try to do is a shadow of educator, like a couple shadow opportunities, like one of educators doing a tour and then one of docents. And everybody does them differently. Like even Elise and Daryl's style is a little bit different than my style than someone else's style. So it's all about finding your own style, but implementing these techniques. Because we're not going to script you, and we want it to be your voice. We don't want to be telling you exactly what to say word for word. So I think,
and that was the last thing I just wanted to touch on, exactly what you were saying. You know, Daryl had specific information that he wanted to convey to you, but it takes some finessing to be able to do this. But the idea is to be able to ask questions that elicit answers that then give you or I the opportunity to expound, you know, and sometimes it doesn't happen, and then maybe you're just sharing that with one or two people on your tour, and that's okay too. You know, if people want to engage you on a one-to-one level during that, or you want to encourage them to communicate with each other, it's really about the experience and just interacting with the art.
And finding your identity and how you deliver it. Megan touched on that big part, like seeing how multiple people do it. I trained Elise, but Elise does it her own way, which I love. And I go to a tour, and even though I'm seeing this, I know the artwork, but I see it with her, and I'm like, oh, and then she does a little more research, so it's even more in depth. So you want to make it your own. Like I've trained a good chunk of our staff, but they all do it differently, and that's
Some
what you
better
want.
than others.
But
I do it as good as he can.
but that's what
we're going to talk about that some better than others too. We're going to talk about homework in a minute. Homework.
Sounds like I need to go ahead and sign. That's what I got to call it out. But thank you so much. You all are awesome.
A couple more minutes, so we're going to do our questions. So who had this lovely work?
I think I did.
Let's pop over to find it.
I didn't bring my questions. They're in the docent.
That's okay. Well, then we'll skip you. Go grab them. 214. Yeah, go out that door to the docent lounge.
Maybe I can bring them.
You want to make them up? Okay. Let's find this work. We're going to do our questions, and then up next will be this one. So whoever has this will be on deck. That's Betty.
Oh, that's me.
That's Betty. Okay. So give me one question, one what question, one why question, one what if question, and one how question. Just one of each.
So what do you think this is? Looking at this, what do you think this is made of?
What do you think this is made of? You don't have to answer.
We're not going to answer.
No, I'm sorry. Just for time. I wish we could. I wish we could.
Why would someone make something like this?
Why would someone make something like this?
What if? What would you think?
What if and how?
What if and how? What did I say for how? Oh, that was how do you think this was made? How might this be used? What
How might
purpose
this
would
be
it
used?
serve?
I
How
love
might
that.
this be used?
And then what if?
What if you needed to make something like this from your community? I was going to talk about the community, but what if?
No, you're good. I think what if was your last one.
Okay.
Yeah.
What if you were charged as an artist with making something like this for your community? What might it look like? How might it be different?
Yeah. Or what if it came to life? What would it do?
How fast would you run?
How fast? All right. I think Betty, you said you have this one.
Yeah, I have to go to
Okay, sorry.
Okay. So why do you think the figure of a woman is placed on the front of the sculpture? What animals can you find in the sculpture?
Oh, I like that.
How do you think the sculpture reflects the status of women in this culture? And what if you were chosen to wear this headdress? How would you feel?
I like it. I like it. I like
It's
it.
a nice story behind that headdress.
That's a headdress, huh?
It's a headdress.
And we just learned something just from the question.
Yeah.
I like that. Our next horse and rider here, Ellen.
So what do you see, especially after the piece we looked at?
What do you see?
Why is there a sword on that person? How would you create this piece? And what if someone gave you this for your home? Would you display it? What would you do with it?
I like the what if someone gave you this piece for your home? What was the second half of it?
What would you do with it?
What would you do with it? Or maybe where would you place it?
Where would you place it?
Yeah. I like that. The first part of it, did you say would you display it?
No, I said, what would you do with it?
Okay, what would you do with it? That one's a little touchy because it opens up opportunity for them to say like throw it in the trash, which is a valid opinion to have.
I kind of wanted to open that
For them to go,
it's a hard, from the picture, it was very hard to see. When I got here and looked at it, I had a very different feeling,
it reads differently.
But it reads differently, and so I thought, oh, there might be people who would say something.
Try it and see what
Right.
happens. Try it
Right.
and see what happens.
I wouldn't be afraid of it.
Don't be afraid of it.
Yeah, I wouldn't
I
be.
like that
Yeah.
attitude.
Yeah.
Who had our lovely woman with the longer earring? Did anyone have this one?
Where is she?
She's lovely, tall, slender.
I do,
Okay,
yes.
that's right back in that corner. Let's go.
Oh, there she
see
is.
Lorelai's. You try it. It doesn't work.
That's what he's stretching. Good balance, girl. Good balance.
Why do you suppose her head is enlarged? Second. Number two, what is the artist abstracted here and what might it mean? Number three, she has a hole, trust me, she has a hole in the back of her head. How could you explain that? And my favorite, what if you were Picasso and you saw her for the first time? What would you take away? What would you incorporate into your own work? What do you, Picasso, see here? Because these came first and the Picassos came second.
Say your first one again, your very first question again, I'm sorry.
Oh, why do you suppose her head is enlarged? What
Yes.
explanation?
Yes, I also think the off balance of the earring. So maybe like why does she just have, why is there just one earring? Was there, something, I like the head, the focus, because there is that asymmetry of like one earring, you feel like there should be a second one. Did one fall out? Is it because it's older? Is it because it just, the wood gave way? Or is it a symbol of, is having one earring mean something?
Yes.
Very good. Thank you, Lorelai. I like your Picasso question. That was interesting. Who has? Does anyone else have anything in the Global Africa Gallery? I think that's. We have one more. Which one?
The Congo.
Yeah, he is right over there.
What was this gallery called before?
I don't know.
Probably ancient Africa or something,
Probably
because you said in
ancient
the
Africa.
past. So I would say ancient
And that would get, and global is better because
Yeah.
this is, it's not only from different time periods, but this is many different people. We're not looking at one specific area.
But in the old, it had modern art in it, if you will, you know, current artists and things in it, but
Just the naming.
that was cool about the name change.
All right, so we've got your 4 questions. Hit us with them.
So I just have to say, he's a lot smaller than I thought he was from the picture.
Oh, well, there's a question right there. How would you feel if he was 10 times this size?
Well, there we go.
And there's a question. Okay, there's my question.
Okay, we got to my hair question, okay. So why would there have been a container on this figure containing powerful ingredients? But you have to read the label to know. You said
Okay.
read the label, so I read
Okay.
the label and I took it from there.
All right.
Okay, what might substances on this figure have been used for? Because again, the label tells you about substances. So what might they have been used for? How might the container have been used for communication? And what if the substance which had been here had not been available to this community? But you have to read the label.
Okay.
I would
So
have.
before the label, so you would layer in these questions once you've given them, so once they've learned what the substance is. What might be a question you would start with before you even gave them any label content? What's like one that you could throw out just to get that ball rolling?
Well, I think I would start with, let's look at this figure and let's look at the various substances that the figure is composed of. So what do you see with what media is used with this figure, on this figure?
So what is this created of? Yeah, what materials are used to create this figure? And maybe what is this figure for, right? What would this figure be used for? And then that leads you into, that leading question into it helps substances, you know, the importance of these substances for the community. Yeah, I like your label.
I actually had, what was the other one? Well, then I went into, again, it was back to the label. Why was communication with the deceased important? Because it talks about the communication.
Well, I think that's a
So
good
I went to-
question.
so I have a
That's a
long-
family
I have a long
community,
one,
and kind of
yes.
ties into the other work that Daryl was talking about, the family connection. Any others in this space? I think that's all. Let's go over to ancient Mediterranean. We'll start, who has a little pomegranate?
Lorelei.
We'll start with the little pomegranate.
You can't see the size of it.
That's okay, use that in a question. Thank you, Daryl, see you later. Use that as one of your questions. Give us one what if, one how, and one why. Just one of each.
But if you can't see it and you don't know the size of it, you can be impressed by what it was.
Oh, just wing it.
Give us one of each. Give us one of each.
Okay, what do you think of the design?
Oh, what do you think of the design?
And as far as why, what do you think this was being used for?
Why? Wait, that was why?
Yeah.
But you said, what do you think this is used for?
Okay. I'm not good at this, why was this being, why would you use this? And then how was it made, with the delicacy of this design?
How is it made? That's a good one to follow up with the design one too, because you're asking about the look of it. What was your last one? What if?
I don't know, I can't read my own. I can't read this.
That's okay. Does anybody have an idea for a what if question?
What if it was really big or really small?
What if it was really big? What if it was really small?
It's big, small.
What if you looked inside? What would it look like on the inside?
What if it was yours and you had it in your home? What would you use it for?
Okay. What if it was yours? What would you use it for to hold?
What if the designer had not put the ribbon lines on it, but had continued with the design? All right, nice.
We will find that where it is
So
somewhere around.
look at the border of the picture, maybe that will give you an idea where it is. There's like a cloth hanging above it.
It might be a me, Global Africa. Let's do, who has this, the Hanet there? All right, Sue, because we've only got a couple more minutes, so we got her.
So for why do you think
think the artist painted these symbols? I think she covered.
Why do you think the artist painted these symbols? That's a great question.
And then what is actually, I mean, what do you think this work represents?
What do you think this represents?
Culturally, and then how would you describe this figure painted on? I think that's what if you were the person who want this to be created? What is the most important thing for you?
Yeah, what story would you want your coffin lid to tell? What if this was created for you? Very good, Sue. Who had our canoptic jar?
I do.
Canoptic jar, please, after you, George.
What do you see when you look at this particular piece?
I love what do you see. You know how I feel about what do you see.
Why do you think it was created?
Why do you think it was created?
And how could it be used?
How could it be used is great.
And it's here in the life after death section of this exhibit. So what does that tell you?
Oh, I like your tie-in of the information at the top. I like that.
It's not accidental that it's here. What is it telling you?
There's a theme here. What is it? I like that.
What is the theme here?
Excellent.
Okay, and let's see, what was the next one? What goes, it looks like a jar, and looks like a lid on that particular jar. What do you think goes in that, in this jar?
Cookies.
Here's what it actually is used for.
So, the last question, because I'm assuming that you know what mummification is by this time. What if you had the opportunity to unwrap a mummy, an ancient mummy? Would you choose that opportunity?
Oh!
That is a great question.
Now, what do you think you might see?
Oh, very good.
Alright, try it.
We've got, I think, 2 or 3 more in this gallery. Who has our horn back here? Our glass horn on the right side there, the blue one, the drinking
I do.
horn? All right, go ahead.
Alright. So, what does this remind you of? Because it looks exactly like what it is. How do you think the Romans used this?
How do you think the Romans used this? I love that.
What if this was still an animal's horn? What animal?
Oh.
What animal do you think it came from?
Oh, I like that.
And then my last one is, why do you think it was adapted from horn to glass?
Yeah, why not use an animal's horn? Why would they make it out of glass? Very nice. I like it, I like it. Who has one of our friendly red figure?
I do, but my label copy was not for the picture.
Oh.
I kept trying to see, here's no Hercules here. So I have the label copy for this, but this is the visual.
Well, do your questions on the, yeah.
Visual.
See, sometimes.
Yeah.
I threw you a curveball.
All right, so how is this used? What is the story shown by these figures? Why would the artist choose to decorate it like this? And what if it were 1/4 the size?
I like it. Very good. And I'm sorry about your label copy.
Oh, that's okay.
I farmed out that task, so that I will take the blame for it, but I did have someone else do this for me.
There, I thought all the Eugene Shakers were here.
It's in Global Africa?
Yeah.
Oh, wonderful. So we know it exists. Who has this vase here?
It's here. Me.
That's
I
you?
have this one, yeah.
Okay, wonderful. Go ahead.
So, Megan's favorite question, what do you see here?
Be still, my heart.
Exactly. Let me see. How would you use this vessel? One of my favorites. If these figures came to life, what would they be doing? Right? Because they're like dancing and so I like that would be kind of fun and activity to strike the pose. And then why do you think the artist chose to depict these figures?
I like them. Very good. I think with the both red figures, how was it made would be an interesting one. Once you watch the video of how the painting is done, I think people will be really impressed to hear about a little bit about how.
Why is it that color?
Yeah, the intricacy of the red clay versus the black slip. Who has our friend here that's missing a nose?
I have. And your favorite question?
Are you gonna use it? It's like Christmas. I know, right? Isn't that great?
Okay, so what do you see?
What do you see?
Oh, no. And why do you think the boy posed for the sculpture? Leads back to family.
Right.
And then how old do you think he is?
Oh, that's a good one.
And then what if you could speak with him? What would you say?
I like that. Very good.
Or what would you ask him, right?
I think too, once we talked about the coloring that would have been applied to, you could throw in one that's, how would you feel if this was painted and then with X, Y, or Z colors, with skin tones, with hair color, or if you had to apply paint, how would you decorate this face? Would you give them makeup? Is this person, adorned a certain way, perhaps? Just a thought. Those are very good. And then our last friend, and I think if I missed anyone, tell me, but I think our last one is our little buddy here, our male figure. Is that you?
That's so
pretty. Is that him?
Yeah.
Is that the one or should I mess him up?
No, that's one.
Oh, okay.
I thought it was that one.
All right. Anyone else after Raphael, or is he our last one to go? Okay.
So as why were these figures placed in the tomb with them? He's supposed to be an elite person. What about this marks him as elite? How do we know? How do you think it lasted for this long?
How do you think it lasted for this long? There's a good conversation there too about the legs, right?
What if this piece were life size?
Oh.
Actually, another question I was going to say is, what if it was made of gold? Do you think it would have lasted this long?
I like the material swap up. What if it was made out of something else? That's a fun way to think about it. Yeah.
Or pocketed?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, give all of yourselves a round of applause. I know you're sick of the questioning activities. So, two things before we go. I'm going to put your homework on the website. So I'm going to ask you all to check the website for your homework. Part of it is already there. I have one more thing to add. We are not meeting next week. We have a break. So I've given you a little extra homework. There's going to be 3 tasks. But you have 2 weeks to complete it. And if you run into time issues, just let me know. I'm happy to work with any of you. But we're not going to meet next week. So we have a week off, relax, enjoy your Thursday night, put your feet up. And then we will be back on the 19th. Is that right? Did I get the date right? Correct. We will be looking at the Valentine House. So part of your homework will focus on the Valentine House. Part of your homework is to go to a public tour, to go see a public tour at another institution, and I'm going to have a little worksheet on the site for you to fill out when you go on that public tour. That can be anywhere. It just can't be here at the Newark Museum. So take a public tour somewhere. Take a friend, go on a weekend, or go when it's a free day, if that is better for you. And then reading more of your tour packet. Did everybody see the homework from last week about that tour packet? It really spells out for you, another museum created that really spells out for you just how to build a tour from beginning to end. So we're going to continue reading a little more on that. It's really easy. I read through it in like 10 minutes. It's not a lot of text, but it's something that I think printing out and holding on to kind of just spells everything out for you.